The Void Devourer crawled out from the center of the galaxy like death itself had come alive. Captain Jin stood in the dim control room of Outpost 7, watching the holographic display with his hands clenched behind his back, each blinking. Dot on the star map represented an entire solar system. One by one, they were going dark. "How many this time?" Jin asked, though he dreaded the answer. Communications Officer Yu checked her readings twice before speaking. 14 systems in. The last hour, sir. The Zephyrian Empire sent their entire battle fleet to stop it. 2,000 ships. She paused, swallowing hard. They lasted 3 hours and 12 minutes. Jin felt his stomach drop. The Zephyrians weren't some backwater species with outdated weapons. They had ruled half the galaxy for 50,000 years. Their ships could crack planets in half, and their shields could stop black holes. If they couldn't even slow this thing down, what hope did anyone have? The main screen flickered and showed grainy footage from a Zephyrian survivor pod. The Void Devourer filled the entire view like a living storm cloud, but made of something that hurt to look at. It wasn't just black, it was the absence of everything. Stars, planets, space itself seemed to fold inward and disappear wherever it touched. "Sir, we're getting panic broadcasts from every corner of the galaxy," reported Technician Lee from his station. "The Crystalline Confederation is evacuating their core worlds. The gas giants of Proxima are fleeing to dark space. Even the machine worlds are going silent." Jin walked closer to the display, studying the creature's path. For the past month, their little human listening post had been tracking alien communications. They'd learned languages, mapped territories, and watched civilizations that were older than Earth's entire history. Now those same civilizations were running scared. "Where's it heading next?" Jin asked. Yu pulled up the projection. A red line traced across the galaxy map, showing the Devourer's path. "At current speed, it'll hit the inner systems in 6 months. The core worlds have maybe 8 months before—" She didn't finish the sentence. Before they all die, Jin thought. Every planet, every space station, every living thing in the galaxy's heart would be consumed by this cosmic nightmare. The communication board lit up with incoming signals. Dozens of alien languages filled the airwaves, all saying the same thing in different ways. "Help us. Save us. We're all going to die." Jin looked around the small control room at his crew. 23 humans in a tiny metal box, floating at the edge of known space. They'd been sent here to listen and learn, not to fight monsters that could eat entire star systems for breakfast. "Sir," Yu said quietly, "should we send a message to Earth? Let them know what's coming." Jin stared at the display showing the Devourer's relentless advance. 6 months to the inner systems, maybe 12 months before it reached the outer rim where Earth waited, completely unaware that death itself was heading their way. "Not yet," he said finally. "First, we need to understand what we're really dealing with." The Great Assembly Hall. On Nexus Prime had never seen anything like this. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy packed into a space designed for half that number. The air itself seemed to vibrate with fear and desperation. A species that had never spoken to each other before now shouted over one another in panic. Admiral Han sat in the back row with his small team, trying to make sense of the chaos. His translator device buzzed and sparked, overloaded by the dozens of alien languages filling the room all at once. The humans had arrived 3 days ago on their small ship, uninvited and largely ignored. Most of the alien delegates didn't even know they existed. "Can you make out what they're saying?" whispered Colonel Na, leaning closer to Han. "Bits and pieces," Han replied, adjusting his earpiece. "That group over there with the crystal bodies, they're showing math, probability calculations. None of them look good. The crystalline architects were 8 feet tall and looked like living diamonds. Their bodies pulsed with inner light as they projected holographic numbers into the air above their heads. Every calculation showed the same result, 0% survival chance. Near the center of the hall, beings made of pure energy flickered like angry lightning. The luminols had no solid form, existing as conscious electricity contained in special suits. Right now, their usual calm blue glow had turned a frantic red. "The energy beings are terrified," observed Commander Ryu, taking notes on his tablet. "I've never seen anything scare creatures that don't even have physical bodies." A thunderous roar filled the hall as the Prime Speaker called for order. The massive insectoid creature stood 20 feet tall, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the room's lights like black mirrors. When it spoke, every translator in the room worked overtime to convert its clicking language into something others could understand. "Silence," the Prime Speaker commanded. "We have run every simulation our greatest minds can devise. The results are always the same." The hall gradually quieted, thousands of alien eyes turning toward the towering figure. This entity, this void, devourer, it does not follow the rules of physics as we understand them. Our most powerful energy weapons make it stronger. Our quantum shields might as well be paper. It consumes matter at the molecular level, converting everything into pure entropy. A wave of terrified murmurs swept through the crowd. Han watched. A species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years broke down in despair. The proud Zephyrian survivors wept openly. The ancient eternal builders, creatures older than Earth's sun, sat in stunned silence. "We estimate 6 months before it reaches the core worlds," the Prime Speaker continued. "Perhaps 12 before it consumes the entire galaxy. There is no weapon that can stop it, no defense that can slow it. We can only evacuate what populations we can and hope to find refuge in dark space." In the back, Han exchanged glances with his team. Everyone else was talking about running away, but humans had a different way of thinking about impossible problems. The evacuation had already begun across 3 star systems. Massive cargo ships, each the size of a small moon, loaded millions of refugees from the outer colonies. The sight would have been impressive under different circumstances, a coordinated effort involving hundreds of species working together for the first time in galactic history. Instead, it felt like watching the death of civilization itself. Sensor. Operator Crix was monitoring the long-range scanners when something unusual appeared on his screen. The insectoid being's compound eyes focused on the display, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Control, this is Deep Scan Station 7. Crix transmitted. I'm detecting unknown vessels approaching the Nexus Prime system." "How many ships?" came the reply from the Orbital Control Center. Crix counted the dots on his screen. 12 vessels, relatively small. But here's the strange part. They're using fusion drives, chemical propulsion with nuclear enhancement. There was a long pause before Control responded. "Fusion drives, are you certain? That technology is at least 10,000 years old." "Confirmed." "I'm also detecting metal hulls, not smart matter, not crystalline matrix, not even basic polymer composites. They're flying around in refined metal." The evacuation coordinator, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Vash, drifted over to examine the readings personally. "This makes no sense. What species still uses such primitive construction methods?" Before anyone could answer, the communication array lit up with an incoming signal. The duty officer, a young Zephyrian named Toll, looked confused as he studied his instruments. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown fleet," Toll announced. "It's audio only, which is strange enough, but the language—" He paused, checking his readings again. "The computer says it's called English." "Never heard of it." Vash's tentacles curled with curiosity. "Can the translator handle it?" "Barely. The linguistic patterns are completely unfamiliar. It's like nothing in our databases." The main communication channel crackled to life. Through the static and translation errors, a calm voice emerged. The words were clear and simple, spoken with a confidence that seemed completely out of place given the galaxy's current situation. "This is Admiral Han of the Human Defense Fleet. We understand you have a problem that needs solving." The evacuation control center fell completely silent. Every being present, insectoids, energy creatures, plant-based life forms, and mechanical beings, all stopped what they were doing and stared at the communication console. "Human?" whispered Toll. "I've never heard of any species called humans." Vash's tentacles twitched nervously. "Neither have I." "Computer, search all galactic databases for references to humans or Human Defense Fleet." "Search complete," the computer responded. "No matches found in any known records." The implications hit everyone at once. Here was an unknown species, flying primitive ships, approaching during the worst crisis in galactic history. And instead of asking for help or running away like everyone else, they were offering to solve the problem. "Should we respond?" asked Tull. Vash looked around the room at the confused faces of his crew. "Tell them to identify themselves and state their intentions, and send their location to the Council immediately." The Great Assembly Hall had hosted first contact ceremonies for thousands of years, but nothing quite like this. Admiral Han walked down the center aisle with two of his officers, their heavy boots echoing on the polished floor. Every alien eye in the room followed them, and Han could feel the weight of their stares. The human delegation looked completely out of place among the advanced beings around them, where other species wore flowing energy fields or crystalline armor that shifted colors. The humans dressed in simple dark blue uniforms with metal buttons and fabric patches. Their equipment was equally primitive. Radios with actual antennas, tablets with physical screens and weapons that any galactic historian would recognize as projectile-based firearms. "This is unprecedented," whispered a delegate from the ethereal collective, its gaseous form shimmering with confusion. "They're carrying chemical propellant weapons inside the council chambers." The prime speaker raised one of its four arms for silence, its compound eyes fixed on the humans as they stopped at the center of the speaking area. "State your designation and planetary origin," it commanded, its voice booming through the translation systems. "Admiral Han, representing Earth and the Human Defense Fleet," Han replied without any trace of nervousness. "We received your distress signals and came to offer assistance." A ripple of what might have been laughter went through the assembled delegates. The crystalline architects pulsed with amused light patterns, while several of the machine-based species emitted mechanical clicking sounds. "You wish to help?" The prime speaker's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Your vessels are constructed of refined metal. Your propulsion systems burn chemical fuel. You're suggesting we trust the survival of the galaxy to a species that still uses what we abandoned 10,000 years ago." Han looked around the room calmly, taking in the sea of alien faces. Colonel Na stood to his right, her hand resting casually on her sidearm, not threateningly, but with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to use it. Commander Ryu had pulled out his tablet and was taking notes, apparently unbothered by being the center of attention for thousands of advanced beings. "With respect, Prime Speaker," Han said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "your advanced technology doesn't seem to be working against this threat. The Zephyrian Empire had quantum weapons that could crack moons. The Void Devourer. Absorb them. Your energy shields can stop black holes, but they're useless against this entity." The hall grew quieter as delegates realized the human was right. "Sometimes," Han continued, "the old ways work better than the new ones. Sometimes simple is more effective than complex." An elderly delegate from the Eternal Builders, a race older than most stars, leaned forward in its hover chair. "You speak of simple solutions to an impossible problem. What could your primitive methods possibly accomplish that our advanced sciences cannot?" Han smiled, a very human expression that didn't translate well, but somehow conveyed confidence. "We specialize in solving problems that seem impossible." While the galactic delegates argued about evacuation routes and refugee camps, the small human team had set up their equipment in a corner of the council chambers. Lieutenant So hunched over her laptop, analyzing footage from every encounter with the Void Devourer. The screen showed grainy images of the entity consuming entire fleets, each frame more terrifying than the last. "Look at this pattern," So said, pointing to her screen as Han and the others gathered around. "Every time a ship fires energy weapons, at it the Devourer actually gets bigger. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, antimatter missiles, they all make it stronger." Commander Ryu pulled up additional data on his tablet. "Same thing with defensive systems, force fields, energy barriers, even gravity shields. The moment they activate, the creature homes in on them like a magnet." The alien council members nearby were deep in discussion about establishing refugee colonies in distant galaxies. Their holographic displays showed massive evacuation ships and temporary habitats for billions of beings. It was an impressive logistical plan, but it was still just running away. "What about this?" So highlighted a section of video showing a piece of debris hitting the Devourer. When that Zephyrian ship broke apart, the metal fragments actually penetrated its outer layer before being absorbed. Han studied the footage carefully. Physical matter. Not energy, just stuff. Exactly. Mass moving at speed. Basic physics. That every species learned 10 million years ago and then forgot about. The humans looked at each other, the same thought forming in all their minds. Han stood up and walked back toward the center of the council chamber, where the Prime Speaker was listening to yet another evacuation proposal. "Prime Speaker," Han called out, his voice cutting through the alien chatter, "may I present an alternative?" The massive insectoid turned its compound eyes toward him. "You have an evacuation plan superior to what our greatest logisticians have." "Devised." "Not evacuation," Han said simply. "Attack." The hall fell silent. Several delegates made sounds that their translators couldn't interpret, but the meaning was clear. Shock and disbelief. "The entity absorbs energy," Han explained, gesturing to SO's data being projected above them. "It redirects quantum attacks. Back at your ships. It feeds on exotic matter and grows stronger with every advanced weapon you fire at it." The Prime Speaker's mandibles clicked impatiently. "Yes, we are aware of this, which is why evacuation is our only option." "But what about simple kinetic force?" Han asked. "Mass moving at velocity, no energy signatures to absorb, no exotic physics to redirect, just heavy objects going really fast." The translator system struggled for a moment before the Prime Speaker responded. "You mean projectile weapons, kinetic bombardment? Those methods haven't been used in warfare for 10,000 years. Han smiled. "Exactly. Which is why the Devourer won't be adapted to defend against them." The proposal hanging in the air was insane. Fight the most dangerous entity in galactic history using technology that most species considered prehistoric. The Caldris system was dying as the human fleet approached. What had once been home to 3 billion crystalline beings was now nothing more than swirling dust and broken planets. The Void Devourer hung in space like a living storm cloud, feeding on the remnants of an entire civilization. Captain Mi stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the Incheon, watching the nightmare through the main view screen. Around her, the crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons systems and running final diagnostics. The ship felt solid under her feet, real metal, real engines, real people doing a real job. "Distance to target?" she asked. 50,000 kilometers and closing, reported Navigation Officer Park. "At this range, we should be invisible to its sensors." Mai nodded. The human ships were running silent, using minimal power and no active scanning. While alien vessels lit up space with their energy signatures, the human fleet drifted forward like metal ghosts. No shields, no exotic matter reactors, no quantum anything, just steel hulls and determination. "Contact from the Admiral," announced. Communications Officer Kim. Admiral Han's voice filled the bridge, calm and steady, despite what they were about to attempt. "All ships, this is Admiral Han. In 30 seconds, we're going to do something that's never been tried before. We're going to hit this thing with the oldest weapon in human history, rocks thrown really, really hard." A few nervous chuckles came from the crew. Mi smiled despite herself. "Leave it to humans to joke before charging into certain death. Remember," Han continued, "we're not here to be heroes. We're not here to make speeches or die gloriously. We're here to do a job. Our job is to kill this thing before it kills everyone else. So let's get to work." Mi turned to her weapons officer. "Status on the kinetic batteries?" "All railguns loaded." "And ready, Captain," reported Lieutenant Cho. "Tungsten rods, each one weighing 2 tons, accelerated to 15% of light speed. We've got 500 rounds per gun." The targeting display showed the Devourer growing larger as they approached. Up close, it was even more terrifying than the footage had suggested. It wasn't just black. It was the absence of everything, a hole in reality that hurt to look at directly. "All ships, this is Han. Target the center mass, maximum rate of fire. Let's see how it handles a few thousand hunks of metal moving at relativistic speeds." Mi looked around her bridge one last time. Her crew was ready, their faces set with grim determination. "Kinetic bombardment ready, sir?" "Fire." The Incheon shuddered as its railguns unleashed their payload. Thousands of tungsten rods streaked through space, invisible to the naked eye but carrying the force of nuclear weapons. Pure momentum given deadly form. The tungsten rods hit the Void Devourer like a metal hurricane. Each projectile carried the energy of a small nuclear bomb, but without any exotic particles for the entity to absorb. The creature's reality-warping defenses tried to bend space around the incoming barrage, but physics was physics. Mass moving at 15% of light speed didn't care about fancy alien science. "Direct hits across the target surface," reported Captain Me from her destroyer. "The kinetic rounds are punching straight through its outer layers." Admiral Han watched from his command ship as the Devourer writhed in what might have been pain or confusion. For the first time since it had awakened, something was actually hurting it. The entity's dark surface rippled and twisted, trying to adapt to this new threat. "Boarding shuttles launch now while it's distracted," Han ordered. Lieutenant Jun strapped himself into the pilot seat of the lead assault shuttle, his powered armor making the small cockpit even more cramped. Behind him, 12 Marines checked their equipment one final time. No energy weapons, no quantum suits, no smart matter anything. Just humans in metal armor carrying ballistic rifles and explosive charges. "Remember, once we're inside, our comms might get scrambled," Jun told his team over the radio. "Stick together, watch each other's backs, and if something doesn't look right, shoot it." The shuttle launched from the belly of Han's ship, followed by 3 others. They flew straight at the wounded sections of the Devourer, where the kinetic bombardment had torn gaping holes in its surface. Up close, the entity looked even more wrong, like reality had been turned inside out and painted black. 30 seconds to contact," John announced. "Check your neural dampeners. This thing's been messing with alien minds since it woke up." Each Marine touched the small metal device attached to their helmet. The dampeners were crude compared to alien technology, just magnetic field generators that disrupted psychic interference. But crude was good. Crude meant the Devourer couldn't adapt to it easily. The shuttle punched through the entity's outer membrane and into something that definitely wasn't normal space. The walls around them pulsed with sick light, and gravity seemed to point in 3 directions at once. Jan's armor system screamed warnings about radiation and exotic particles, but the metal plating held. "Everyone still with me?" Jun called out as they touched down on what might have been a floor. "Present and accounted for," came the replies. From his team, as they moved deeper into the creature's body, Jun felt something trying to crawl into his thoughts. Whispers of despair, images of Earth burning, the voices of everyone he'd ever cared about begging him to give up. "It's trying to get inside our heads," he reported over the crackling comm system. "But the neural dampeners are holding." Behind him, Sergeant Bin grinned inside his helmet. "Joke's on this thing. My head's too thick for anything to get through." The deeper they went into the Devourer, the more wrong everything became. The walls weren't just dark, they were made of something that had once been alive. Lieutenant Jun's flashlight beam revealed twisted metal fused with organic tissue, cables that pulsed like veins, and surfaces that seemed to breathe. "This isn't natural," whispered Corporal Kim, running her gloved hand along what looked like a metal ribcage. "Someone built this thing." Jun stopped at a massive chamber deep in the entity's core. His flashlight illuminated something that made his blood run cold. Ancient computers lined the walls, their screens flickering with alien text. But these weren't just machines. They were connected to massive brain-like structures that pulsed with sickly light. "It's a weapon," Jun said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some civilization turned their own people into this, a living battleship designed to consume everything." Sergeant Bin moved closer to examine the neural networks. "How old do you think this thing is?" "Old enough that whoever built it is long dead," Jun replied. "But their weapon kept going, kept eating, kept growing. The malevolent intelligence they'd felt earlier was stronger here." Jun could sense it pressing against his mind, trying to break through the neural dampener. Images flashed through his thoughts, visions of Earth's cities in flames, his family screaming as darkness consumed them. The Devourer was showing him what would happen if they failed. "Bin, start planting the charges," Jun ordered, pushing the visions away. "Everyone else, defensive positions. This thing knows we're here now." Sergeant Bin pulled the nuclear devices from his pack. Simple fusion bombs, no fancy quantum physics involved. Just raw nuclear fire that would burn hot enough to melt the biomechanical systems, keeping this nightmare alive. First charge placed, Bin reported, attaching the device to one of the larger neural clusters. Timer set for 10 minutes. Around them, the chamber began to change. The walls started closing in and new passages opened up to release waves of defense systems. Half machine, half living tissue, all deadly. "Keep moving," Jun shouted, firing his rifle at the approaching horrors. "We need all 12 charges in place." One by one, Bin planted the nuclear devices throughout the core chamber. Each bomb was positioned to cause maximum damage to the creature's central nervous system. The Devourer fought back, sending waves of nightmare creatures and psychic attacks, but the Marines held their ground. "Last charge planted," Bin announced. "We've got 3 minutes." Jun looked around at his team. They all knew the truth. There wasn't enough time to get back to the shuttle. The blast would consume everything within 50 kilometers of the core. "For the galaxy, then," Jun said quietly. "For the galaxy," his team replied. The timer hit 0. Nuclear fire erupted through the Devourer's heart, burning away eons of accumulated malevolence in a single, brilliant moment. The nuclear fire spread through the Devourer's core like a cleansing wave, burning away millions of years of accumulated darkness. From their ships, the surviving human fleet watched as the massive entity convulsed and began to collapse in on itself. What had once been a cosmic horror the size of a moon was now just dissipating energy and scattered debris. On Nexus Prime, the emergency session had been going for 18 hours straight. Alien delegates dozed in their seats or floated in meditation, pods exhausted from planning evacuations that now seemed pointless. The first hint that something had changed came from a junior sensor operator, a young Zephyrian named Kex. "Sir," Kex said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "The Devourers. Energy signature just disappeared." The Prime Speaker's compound eyes snapped to attention. "Disappeared how? Did it cloak itself?" "No, sir. It's gone. Completely gone. Like it never existed." Within minutes, the entire council chamber was in chaos again, but this time it was the chaos of hope, not fear. Delegates from across the galaxy checked and double-checked the readings. Long-range scanners showed nothing but empty space where the cosmic horror had been feeding on the Caldris system. 3 days later, Admiral Han's battered flagship limped back to Nexus Prime. The Soul looked like it had been through a war, hull plates torn away, antenna arrays destroyed, and scorch marks across its metal surface. Half the human fleet hadn't made it back at all. Han walked into the council chamber wearing the same simple uniform as before, though now it was torn and stained with soot. His face was tired, and he moved like someone who had lost friends. Behind him, the few surviving members of his crew looked just as worn. The massive assembly hall fell completely silent as the human admiral made his way to the center speaking area. Thousands of alien representatives watched him with something approaching. "Oh, how?" asked the Prime Speaker, its translator struggling to convey the mix of gratitude and confusion in its voice. "How did you succeed where our greatest civilizations failed? We had technology beyond your understanding, weapons that could crack planets, defenses that could stop black holes, yet none of it worked." Han looked around the room at all the advanced beings staring at him. He shrugged, a very human gesture that the translators couldn't interpret, but somehow everyone understood. "We don't have the luxury of being afraid," he said simply. "When something needs to be done, we just do it." The Prime Speaker leaned forward in its hover throne. "What will your people do now? The galaxy owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Han smiled, that same confident expression that had puzzled the aliens from the beginning. "We'll keep exploring. There's a whole galaxy out here we haven't seen yet." As the human delegation prepared to leave, something fundamental had shifted in the cosmic order. The age of humanity had begun.